Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, criminal court, and other court issues as well as CPS. I am your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. The books are on audio as well. And if you have a tale to tell, you're also welcome to contact me there on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. Now, I have three individuals coming on my podcast. We're going to talk about business owners up against corrupt court systems. And this has been decades in the making, and millions of dollars in financial assets within these three cases combined. These businesses are being trafficked. I welcome back Michael Sobota, who was last on my podcast September 7th, 2025, on YouTube. No lawyer can stop this. He is waiting on a divorce judgment appeal on December 10th. I've got Jackie Sample back on my podcast. She was on season 5, episode 307, where we talked about judicial patterns of behavior in DuPage County, Illinois. And I've got Courtney Vann on. She's a mom, a nana, and female minority shareholder in a closely held corporation from South Padre Island, Texas, battling the Cameron County, Texas courts for her property, an LLC, and its assets. I welcome you all to this podcast to enlighten the public what really goes on when you have a $1 million business.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming
Thank you,
on.
Maria.
Thank you, Maryann.
Sure. Courtney, what is going on with your story? Tell me what this LLC and its assets, what are they doing to you?
Well, it's ongoing, but it started in July of 2020. When I entered into the courtroom, the first attorney, mentioned to me that, I was one of the 0.01% of the richest people in the valley. And, I didn't really understand what that meant at the time. I was like, am I supposed to be flattered by that comment? It really took me back. So not understanding that until about 5 years down the road, I've witnessed, several attorneys who have used conflicts of interest in ways to perform hostile takeovers of corporations. Attorneys that have put in receivership motions to convert business assets and personal assets into business assets and business assets into personal assets so that family courts attorneys could gain access to those assets through, orders with no due process.
This is
Going into my divorce case, within 2 weeks of filing for divorce, my ex-husband and my business attorney, who was a state representative at the time, his name was Eddie Lucio III. His father was a state senator for over 40 years. Upon my filing for divorce, within those 2 weeks, the state senator, my ex-husband, and the state senator's business partner, they signed a personal promissory note for $300,000. A month later, that personal promissory note was changed and $20,000 was added to that personal promissory note. Now, this was a personal promissory note signed by my husband and debt related to my husband and my husband only. So that state rep at that time allowed for that personal promissory note to go unheard of in the family courts. So within 2 weeks of that personal promissory note became a lockout of the female minority shareholder. I was removed from the company. My bank accounts of the company were closed. New accounts were opened. The line of credit, which I still was on and held liable for, was being ran up and down so that my ex-husband could sink the debt of the company into the company as he was liquidating the income. So my hands were tied behind my back and I had no authority to act within my company. Um, 2 weeks prior to filing for divorce, we had had a financial review done, which was something that was done every 6 months because we were bonded to do commercial construction work for $58 million. So our bonding company required us every 6 months to have these financial reviews done. So a financial review was completed 6/31 of 2020. I filed for divorce 7/20 of 2020. So that should have been where the company was divided. You know, there should have never have been a financial auditor put into place. The auditor was used as a time to lock me out while funds were being extorted from the company. A financial auditor, he was paid over $55,000 through the court system. You know, in a family court case, they put in these guardians ad litem, these counselors. So those are the court's state actors that are used to push, you know, the family court fraud in. But when it comes to the business end, the use of a receivership, a forensic auditor, a forensic auditor, when they're paid $56,000, that they're there to find fraud.
Hmm.
Well, while all this lockout was happening, my ex-husband, my corporation, and my employee were being sued in another county outside of Cameron County. It's the San Patricio County in Corpus Christi, Texas. They were being sued for fraud, for creating contracts outside of the already existing contracts for $15 million project. The attorney that was representing my ex-husband, my company, and my employee was Eddie Lucio. But it was his Austin law firm, Beatty, Navarra, and Strama, that was being paid to represent him. So you have an acting LLC attorney signs a promissory note in the beginning while he was an acting state rep, is representing my ex-husband in a fraud case and my company. And then my family law attorney at the time does a deposition of my ex-husband when he on the record states that he intended to bankrupt Coric Enterprises and was using Eddie Lucio to help him. So the state rep is now on record for aiding and fraud. Within a week, Eddie Lucio petitions into the divorce case as co-counsel to my ex-husband. So now he's on a fraud case. He's on the promissory note in the beginning. He is now the attorney acting with the divorce case. Within 2 weeks of him joining the case, the order to put in a receiver and sell marital assets was put into place. That was an order that took my home I was living in. It took our ranch. It was to take the home my ex-husband is living in, and it was to take our vehicles. So now you have a lockout. You know, I've been locked out of the company. My only way to support myself. I now have lost my only vehicle, and now I'm being kicked out of my $1 million home.
Now, explain
So,
this receivership in case people out there don't know what that means.
mhm. So a court-ordered receiver is put into place to stop fraud. So the order became, it initially was my motion to stop the bleeding of the company, which was flipped and became his motion for receivership. And so a receiver is put into place to take hold of those assets that are to be sold. And inside of the order, it says that all the assets proceeds were to be entered into the court's registry. So fast forward, we've got items, every asset that's sold within this receivership Now we have a receiver that's profiting, he's an attorney, off of the sale of these assets that are supposed to be sold and the money's going to the receivership. Well, what happens is this promissory note becomes a lien and an intervention into the divorce case within a couple of weeks of Eddie Lucio becoming the co-counsel in the divorce case. So Eddie Lucio's brother-in-law, Carlos Cisneros, petitions an intervention for Luis Villarreal, who was the initial promissory note. So it was Luis Villarreal, my ex-husband, and Eddie Lucio that signed that initial promissory note. So now that promissory note has become an intervention into the divorce case. And the intervention attorney is Eddie Lucio's brother-in-law, Carlos Cisneros. So that intervention becomes liens on the assets, the company's assets. Remember, this is a personal promissory note to Eric Solis and Eric Solis only. It is now attached to Quirk Enterprises. So now Quirk Enterprises assets are being sold through a receivership. So what happens is that when the closing of these so first, the first item that were sold were the two Mercedes G-Wagons. He had a 2019 Mercedes-Benz G63 AMG matte black with red interior, and I had a 2020 Mercedes-Benz G63 AMG with red interior. So we had two vehicles that were worth at the time, because this was during COVID, over about $200,000 a piece, which were sold, and the monies that went to the court into the court registries were labeled Camaros. I don't know if you know the value of a Camaro versus the value of the
Yeah.
$200,000 Mercedes-Benz G63s, but
Mm-hmm.
they're a small fraction of the price. So those were the only deposits made in the court registry. The first real estate property that was sold was our ranch located in Raymondville, Texas, when 600 for $650,000. None of that money was deposited into the court's registry. The receiver, who should have been paid from the court's registry, was paid through the closing of the sales of the ranch. So that's how the courts are extorting the receivership's cases. Instead of the monies being paid to the receivership's accounts, are being extorted to attorneys through the closing documents of the sales of these assets. So now that money that was received was paid to Luis Villarreal and First Community Bank. The next property that would be sold was the house I was living in that actually did belong to the LLC. Those monies were paid to First Community Bank because these were the ranch and the beach house were tied to that line of credit that I was locked out of at the bank. So he was, sinking the debt into that line of credit so he could push the debt onto assets that were debt free. That was then sold, and that money was through the closing documents of the LLC's asset that those were transferred to Luis Villarreal. Monies paid to that receiver was also paid through the closing. Again, no monies to the court registry. Up until recently, I've been completely locked out of the company. The final judge's orders came out on 5/31 of 23. And the order basically involved all the fraud that happened within the 4 years of the ongoing litigation. That's when the judge did allow for the petitions of intervention to become part of the case. So these assets were previously sold. They were the proceeds were transferred without that final order of allowing for this intervention to become
Hmm.
part of the case. So the receiver, on his own cognizance, decided that it was in the best interest of the estate to go ahead and release the funds to the interventionist. Okay, so now we're 2 years out of the lockout. I still don't know anything about my company. I still own the LLC, even though the assets have been taken. All the proceeds from the profits and the $68 million of proceeds from 68 million in contracts fees were diverted. Now I'm recently asked the IRS to send me my transcripts of my taxes because I was never given a K-1.
Mm.
I'm now learning that I am responsible for the taxes on the $68 million in project fees. The sale of the proceeds from the sale of the ranch, since it was a personal asset, is now $300,000 that was made payable to the IRS shows that it was proceeds payable to me. I have not seen a dime of any of my assets. There were other assets added to the final order that were to be sold through the receiver. My cows. I had some livestock and some livestock trailers. We had a bunch of assets belonging to the LLC that are now missing, and the court registry still sits empty. I believe it was May of 2024 or 25. It was 25. I'm sorry. It was recent that an order to I'm sorry, a new court, a new case was filed to basically get rid of the receivership on the case, but it kept the real estate agent in place who's trying to further liquidate the last asset, and the receiver on the case said that he had sold all the assets per the court order. He did this with no bond. His bond was denied by every order that was put into place. So in Texas, to have a receiver put into place, there's certain elements he has to meet. One would been to take hold of the assets and do an inventory before the receivership. It would have been to post a bond, and then once everything was sold, he should put in a court order showing where everything went. Well, one of the company vehicle that was sold, there was never a title transfer. In the state of Texas, a title transfer has to happen within 30 days of that sale, or that sale never happened. And that's a financial fraud that has happened. Like I said, it's the use of the courts actors, the state actors become different when it's money, like I said, it's receiverships, it's forensic auditors, it's real estate agents, it's attorneys that are aiding one another.
Hmm.
My ex-husband was writing, you know, the fraud case went from my company attorney and was turned over to Teharina, pretty close to go into the appeal state. And attorney Teharina's brother is a 13th COA judge. So, I don't know how a 13th COA judge can sit on an appeal on a fraud case when his brother is the attorney. Also, the 13th COA appeals judge Ruben Pena's son was written a check by my company for consulting fees while this case was about to go into an appeal.
This is beyond cruelty. This is
Well, it's
unimaginable.
cruelty, it's
Fraud.
it's fraud, it shows the big picture, and how deep is the fraud, when you have a state representative. He knows the issues that are going on within the state, and he knows how to use a court. His father has already had RICO charges against him for doing the same thing, using a courtroom to commit extortion and breach the Hobbs Act. So this is, these patterns have not stopped. And when these same individuals are getting away with it, and it's generational when it comes to attorneys and politicians,
Hmm.
it's generational.
Yeah, they're all connected.
Ooh.
If their father's a judge, they become an attorney, then they become a
Hmm.
judge. It just
Yeah.
it's just terrible. The collusion, and
The
they're all playing in the
collusion.
same sandbox.
Exactly, exactly.
I'm so sorry this is happening to you.
Thank you. Thank you. And It's okay because they messed with the wrong woman, you know. I think that they thought that I wasn't intelligent, that they were siding with the smart individual in the case. And I will tell you, my ex-husband, he's really good at, you know, being on a construction site, but bless his heart, he can't add and he can't spell and he can't read. So somebody had to do that, you know. He wasn't smart enough to pull off what happens. You know,
Mhm.
this was way above his pay grade, you know, and he was he was as big of a victim as I was, you know, and he's now seeing it. And that's the crazy part is that, you know, this past few weeks I've had to sit down with my ex-husband and be like, what's going on with our company? How do we, you know, how are we going to pay taxes on this money
Mm.
now? You know, where do you have any of the bills of sales so we can figure out how we're going to do our taxes on these assets that the courts took from you? Do you have receipts that shows the monies that were paid to the receivers so we can write those fees off?
What was he thinking?
He wasn't. He
Uh,
wasn't.
yeah.
He was being sold a lie that in 4 years after he shut down this company that he would reopen. And that he has done because now, you know, he's through Eddie Lucio, the state rep, he's building for SpaceX, which is, you know, money that Eddie Lucio has been given to Elon Musk to come down to the Rio Grande Valley and actually gave him beachfront property to blow his rockets up on. So, you know,
Mm.
that's the big picture. So they wanted to shut down my company. They knew Elon was coming to the valley. They knew that they had contracts locked up. They knew they needed a government contractor that had the experience that we did, that had the bonding capacity.
Mm.
You know, sadly, my children are doing work for these companies at SpaceX, and I have to sit down and you know, ask myself, wow, my kids don't really understand that they got ahead by pushing their mother down.
Hmm.
So, you know, that's the sad part when it comes to family court is that children will somehow become weaponized, you know, somehow.
And they've never sat down and talked to you about SpaceX and their jobs there, or have they
Well,
talked about it?
they're you know, they all have a contract and they can't speak. You know, SpaceX makes them sign to, you know, you can't talk about that stuff. But my ex-husband talks about it to me. He's like, "Yeah, when I was out there doing the SpaceX work." I'm like, "Wow." You know?
Well, he can talk about it.
He can talk about it. Yeah. So,
So the relationships with your children, would you say you talk to them?
no, my kids are good. You know, they've come around. They saw the big picture. My ex-husband, you know, you don't have to talk bad about your ex, you know, in cases like mine. That eventually they'll show them who they are. And, you know, when your kids are 30, 25, and 24, they can see it for themselves. You know, my ex-husband did some horrible things to them during this time, and you know, they know who was solid. They know who my role never changed as mom. I never fluctuated as a different person. I was always the mom that, you know, that they
Mhm.
knew I was.
Oh, it's so
Mm.
unfortunate that all of this has happened. And do you see an end to this soon, or is this going to continue for more years?
Well, you know, this whole receivership is it's a big issue because, you know, these receivers are being put in all over the state of Texas and I'm sure other states as well. But I know the state of Texas does have that mandatory bond, and that mandatory bond was waived in my court case many a times. You cannot waive a mandatory bond when you have a receiver that's in charge of millions of dollars in assets. How in the heck are you waiving a bond? So I have a bond issue right now that, you know, hopefully something happens. But overall, I think, you know, it won't be much longer. I'll have a federal suit against these state actors, you know.
Well, that's
That's the goal.
right. Right. You'll
Yeah,
have to keep us all updated and keep us
I
posted on
will.
that.
I will. I sure will. And it was through all this that I met some really amazing
Mhm.
people, Michael and Jackie. And it was hard for me to find people in the family courts that had the same type of activity that was going on. It wasn't about, I mean, I know Michael does have kids, but it wasn't about just the kids. It was the big picture of the fraud is your children because they are money, but the fraud are your assets because that is money. These
Mhm.
courts are thriving on our children as assets, our assets as assets. It's the court's equity, and it's the court's equity that is weighed the day you walk into that family court, and it's the court's equity that drives every case, whether it's children, whether it's assets, it doesn't matter. It's the court's equity.
It does. It is. It's a money court.
They want that money.
They want
They
that money.
want the money and they take the money. They
Mhm.
unlawfully take the money. So my case started in DuPage County in February 7th, 2023. What started off as should have been a divorce where you split your assets according to the law, quickly turned into pretty much a RICO case right away. So the first couple of months of the divorce, I noticed, my spouse took control of all of our assets, in spite of there being a court order issued, a valid court order stating no one is to dissipate, close accounts, et cetera, et cetera. He violated completely everything on the court order. So when I went to court, to file a motion to reinstate the financial status quo, the judge wouldn't allow me to present my motion. In fact, the judge quickly approved a motion to force the sale of my home based upon fraudulent financial affidavits. So my spouse submitted financial affidavits stating that he made $12,000 a month and that we had no assets. Now we just finished building a $3 million home, but we have no assets and our income is what, $144,000 a year? Kind of ludicrous, right?
Mhm.
So shortly after, I did have an attorney and I pleaded with those attorneys, will you please file a motion to hold him in contempt? He's closed the accounts and I'm penniless and I'm begging for money. They wouldn't do anything. They never filed one document to stop my husband from depleting our assets, stealing the computer or locking me out of the computer. So then we get to judge number two. This particular judge, Judge James Arrell, he actually signed an order to force the sale of my marital home. Although we have over 5 million in digital currency, there's a business partnership with a company called CareScore. And I never actually got to do any audits because I was stripped of my assets. I didn't have any money to do anything on my own. So I never got to know like what our assets are worth in terms of the company. But for sure, I know what our salaries were. I know what we had in the bank. I know what our assets were in digital currency. Although I submitted it over and over, Judge Arrell ignored, all of our financial documents, just as the first judge. So now we got two judges here. I'm pleading, please reinstate the financial status quo. I'm filing documentation. I'm filing motions to have that done. Neither judge would reinstate the financial status quo. In fact, they moved forward trying to take me to trial and end the divorce without even completing discoveries, without acknowledging all of the financial documentation I turned in. That was just ignored. So I started, making a big stink. I started writing letters. I started filing lots of motions, filing complaints against the judges. And so at that point, judge number two, James Arrell, he said he's going to appoint a financial expert. So finally, I thought, phew, I'm so relieved. They're going to, finally figure this out. The financial expert comes on board. And I notice I'm giving him financial documentation. He's questioning it, and I'm telling Bank of America statements don't lie. Look at the assets. Look at what Madison's making. Here's his salary. And then I found out that this financial expert, he's a divorce attorney with no experience in accounting. So that was all a scheme to get this financial expert to go along with their scheme to defraud me out of all of my finances. Yeah, so I continued filing motions, filing complaints, And then I finally get to judge number 3. And by the way, judge number 2 abruptly retired after I filed so many complaints. I went in with another motion saying, okay, I have emergency situation here. I need you to get Madison in court. We need to hold him in contempt. Instead of holding Madison in contempt, he abruptly recused himself and said, I'm off the case. And shortly after, he was forced to retire. So we get to judge number 3. Again, I'm filing motions because I need money to live. I have no food. I have no working utilities. They're being shut off constantly. My businesses have closed down. So this particular judge, Judge Neil Cerny, he kept telling me that my husband had not been served. I said, I have the proof of service here. I have a sworn statement. He's been served. I come back again. You didn't serve your husband. I'm thinking to myself, am I in the twilight zone?
Yeah.
So I asked, why do you keep saying that? Did Madison tell you he wasn't served? Madison's my husband. So he wouldn't answer that. And shortly after that, he removed himself from the case as well. So,
Now
so
what?
so then we get to judge number 4, Judge Susan Alvarado. She refused to allow me to present my motions. She would cut me off, wouldn't hear me, wouldn't listen to me. And this was just going on and on. But I noticed that my husband's attorneys had removed themselves from the case months prior, but they're still showing up to court as though they're representing my husband, but they're not. And so finally, Judge Alvarado, she issued an order instructing me to exchange financial documentation with Bierman Law Firm, Bierman LLP. Well, that's an unlawful order. So I filed a motion, really just describing what's been going on in the courtroom. She would also have a deputy follow me in the courtroom. The deputy would stand in front of me, in back of me, next to me, following me up to see the judge to intimidate me. This deputy would also try and kick my sister out of the courtroom. He made one of my other supporters leave. They didn't want any witnesses to what was happening. So eventually I filed this motion just saying, okay, this is an unlawful order. I go in to present this motion. Judge Alvarado just, she recused herself, abruptly recused herself and just runs off the bench. So all of this has been happening for a period of 2 years. In the meantime, I'm scrambling, trying to keep utilities on. My health is declining. I have no access to my assets. And my husband's traveling back and forth out of the country. He's taking control of all of our money. So this just is really weird. So we get to judge number 5, which is Judge Neil Cerny. So judge number 3 came back as judge number 5. Interesting. So after a couple of court visits, him saying Madison's never been served, which my husband had been served, he dismisses the divorce and he leaves me married to my abuser.
Yeah, people need to know this stuff goes on all the time.
Yeah, it's a legal abomination. It's absolutely maddening what's been happening for 2 years. I'm not sure if there's an investigation. I was told by Sheriff Mendrick for the DuPage County Sheriff's Department that he was initiating an investigation against Judge James Orrell. He hasn't gotten back to me yet, but he told me this about a month ago. So I'm still waiting to hear. As a matter of fact, there's a gentleman that did your show, attorney Brandon.
Oh,
Brendan
Burns. Yep.
Yes. So he filed a lawsuit against Judge Orrell and several of the judges that I had, similar encounters with. So because of this attorney coming forward and filing this complaint against Judge Orrell for bribery and a few other things, I was told that this investigation would, be underway. So I'm waiting. I'm prayerfully hoping that they will finally investigate and see what's been happening. It's a money grab.
It is.
It's all about money. They've positioned themselves along with my husband to just completely leave me penniless. And I don't understand how this could go on for 2 years and no one's investigating. I've been complaining. I've been writing letters of complaint to almost everyone. So now I'm actually filing criminal complaints. I'm filing them into my case. I'm going to file them with the DOJ, the FBI, you name it, every lawful department I can think of. I'm going to send them a criminal complaint.
I think that's smart.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of like deprivation of rights going on, conspiracy against rights, wire fraud. There's so many criminal elements to my case, starting from the first judge to the last judge, all criminal. It's all about money.
So you're just waiting. And I think, when they filed that complaint and you're not hearing back right away, that's a good sign,
Mhm.
you know, uh, because sometimes it takes them months to realize they're going to do an investigation.
Mhm.
That's what happened when I complained on someone. And it's like, well, I haven't heard anything, so that's good, because if you get a paper within 2 weeks and they're not going to investigate, you know,
You're absolutely right. I filed a complaint with the Judicial Inquiry Board. They oversee the judges here in Illinois. I get a paper back right away that they closed the case. There's no findings. Now, I've filed complaints with their department 3 different occasions, and each time there's no findings. I don't understand how they can possibly come back and say no findings. I have so much documentation. The fact that you have 4 judges accepting fraudulent financial affidavits that are clearly misrepresenting our income by probably 75% or more lower. So I don't understand how 5 judges could make the same mistake or oversight with financial documents.
mhm.
I don't understand how 5 judges just refuse to hold my husband accountable and enforce any of the court orders. So I have a stack of court orders with financial directives. Not one judge enforced the court order. I've got a husband that's on the run with our money. Not one judge make him come to court. So that cannot be, a mistake or a coincidence. That's what you call a conspiracy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think you should resubmit your complaint with more detail, because that happened to me when I was complaining on a lawyer, and I got the namby-pamby letter back 2
Okay.
weeks later, and I was like, that did not sit well with me.
Mhm.
That 2 weeks later, I called the Supreme Court Disciplinary Board here in Pennsylvania. This is where we complain about lawyers. And I talked to a lawyer there, and he was super nice. And he said, "Can you give us more detail? Maybe you didn't give us enough detail." So I submitted, a paper of a motion, not the whole thing, not the whole transcript, but just maybe 3 pieces of paper I submitted as evidence. And then this attorney was investigated, and he did get in trouble.
I'm going to try giving them more. I've given them, I thought, plenty. And speaking of attorneys, you've got Bierman LLP. I
Mhm.
originally consulted with Bierman around June of 2023. A couple months later, my spouse hired them and they used my personal information against me. So I've reported that to the ARDC and nothing. Also, during the course of the divorce, Bierman LLP, one of the attorneys, altered a court order. So I had the transcripts, I have the order, and he intentionally omitted some of the verbiage from the judge because the attorney is who's in charge of writing the orders and the judge signs the order. So if I've got the transcript and it's not matching the court order, there's your evidence that he's omitted some verbiage. So when I went to this attorney and the judge and asked if they could fix it, the attorney told me if I wanted that fixed, I had to settle my case. Well, that's unlawful. And the judge never addressed it. So I reported them both because legally the judge is, obligated to report on crimes,
Mhm.
but he didn't. If they followed the law, they would be all reporting on each other because they were all just a big modern day mafia. Between my attorneys, my husband's attorneys, and the judges, they operate just like a modern day mafia.
Mhm. And didn't they break attorney-client privilege with you, with Bierman?
I would think so. If I've shared all of my information during the consultation and I decided not to hire them,
Mhm.
then my husband shouldn't have, be able to hire them either. But he
Right.
did. In fact, not only did he hire them, they knew all of my information and strategy. And so they used it against me to rid me of all of my assets and make sure that my business is closed. I couldn't get a license renewed. I just had no operating money. Yeah.
That was a clear conflict of interest. They should have not
Yeah.
worked with him, like you said. They shouldn't have worked with him either.
Absolutely. So Judge Arrell allowed this. He knew about it. There's motions filed on it, and Judge Arrell allowed it. If they're all working together, of course, Judge Arrell looked a number of things.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, they made me an offer to settle for 3,000 a month for 3 years, no assets. And then there was another offer for 4,000 a month with no assets for a period of 3 years. Um, at one point, I had an attorney, the Fedor law firm.
Mhm.
He actually yelled at me in his office and told me they made me a reasonable office, and yelled and slammed his hand and told me settle my case. So I had a file this thick with tons of banking information, digital currency, business assets. I said, no, well, let's discuss our assets. I would like my assets. He goes, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about that. Settle your case, and just kept yelling and banging on the table. I thought I don't know, I thought there was a hidden camera somewhere. It left me speechless for a minute because you wouldn't expect that from your own
No.
attorney. But I realized all of my attorneys that I hired, um, once I hired them, they got on the same program as the judges and my husband's attorneys. So instead of me having an attorney, it was an attorney trying to control me and force me into a settlement that suited my husband. I even have one attorney, Schiller, DeCanto, and Fleck, told me that the financial status quo had been reinstated. I have this in an email. So I've reported them to the bar because no such order existed.
Mm.
So they had me thinking the financial status quo, has been reinstated. I'm going to have access to my funds again. All is well. So they never filed to hold my husband in contempt. They never even filed to reinstate the financial status quo. But yet they sent me an email saying that they did, and that the financial status quo order had been reinstated.
This is
Yeah.
just terrible, terrible. I'm so
It's
sorry to
really
hear
hard
that.
to explain or even believe. There's been
Oh,
so much
I
colluding on
believe
my
it.
case. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's been so much colluding. I mean, my documentation is absolutely perfect. When I speak about things online or when I post about it, it's because I have the documentation. I have supporting documentation. It's very clear what has happened to me for 2.5 years.
Mm.
It's so clear that the judges work together
Mhm.
simultaneously to just block everything I would do. I couldn't file motions at times, Well, I could file them, but I couldn't present my motions,
Mhm.
And even once I filed them, they disregarded them. I submitted financial documentation over and over. Every attorney I had, I submitted financial documentation. Every attorney I had, no one stood up and say, hey, judge, this financial document that Dr. Sample submitted is false. Here's the real information. No one did that. They would just leave the case, and another one come. They would leave the case.
Well, I've heard uh, a lot of bad things come out of Illinois lately.
Yeah. There's so much happening in DuPage County and all of Illinois, actually. I mean,
Right.
it's really a legal atrocity. Listening to Courtney, I know Michael's story, it's unbelievable. Sometimes you don't realize how corrupt the system is until you get a taste of it, until you're in the system. That's when it hit you. And then you quickly realize you're not alone. You
Mhm.
realize this is something that occurs on a regular, you know?
Right. And it's not a one-off. Uh,
No, no.
because look at all of you. It's basically the same collusion, corruption, just in a different state, different
Yep,
city in the
yep.
United States, and probably globally.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And,
Different judge, all of the judges, different
and
courthouse, all of the courthouses.
Right, right.
what they try to do is steer away quickly from that date of onset. The date where where you can really make sense of things, when the finances really make sense the most is when you first split up, right? So you have to do those things quickly. You certainly don't put the money in the hands of a third party that's going to dissipate it in a fight. What you have to quickly do your best to divide the assets so that the parties aren't left with nothing. But the further we moved away from these dates of onset, the object becomes to obscure the finances and erase the past. And it's like, are you kidding me? We went from a A+ lifestyle to a zero?
Mhm.
What?
Mm.
Yes.
Yep.
Mind
Really
blowing, isn't
phenomenal.
It
it?
is.
Mind blowing.
And
And the
my
object becomes to deny access to the very basics so that the lawyer cannot be hired, the accountant can't be hired, the bills can't be paid, and there can't be an investigation.
Correct.
That's
Exactly. Exactly.
and they
that's
isolate you,
railroading.
right?
Mhm.
Complete railroading.
Yep.
And so the victims end up coming together like us.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
And it's a real bond
Mhm.
because our stories are very similar.
Yeah, even though whatever I've been through, I have met so many wonderful people along the way that have been through the same thing, the same, these third party parasites, as
Mhm.
Courtney mentioned, the forensic auditor that had to be paid $55,000 that really didn't do anything. These are all third party parasites, guardian ad litems.
So
Everybody, knows all this.
financial expert who happens to be a
Yeah.
divorce attorney with no experience in accounting. Michael Kors, definitely want to give him some attention. Michael Kors. Yeah. Michael Kors, you should never take a job as a financial expert. If you do, you become part of the scheme, you become part of the collusion
And the crime.
and the crime. Absolutely.
They take a narrative that they create in the beginning that the company or the estate is of no value, and then you know they within those years they pull off what they started in the beginning, and it's the dissipation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They paint that picture, and those attorneys, they see it through, they aid one another,
Hmm.
like your judges, they do their little step, and then they're off the case. And the same with attorneys, they push through whatever their part of the narrative was, and once that's pushed through, then they drop off. I had four attorneys like your judges where, they would have the receivership pushed through, they would drop off. This would be pushed through, they drop off,
Ah,
They
and
sort of
all
spread out
and
the criminal action, right? They spread out the criminal behavior between them.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And then they make the estate pay for those actions,
Mhm.
like now all these attorneys that represented me are, now they're to be paid through the receivership. So they're all supporting one another, in the common goal.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've had about 6 different attorneys. Then my spouse has had his 2 attorneys. Then we've got the financial expert person that actually didn't produce any relevant information.
Mhm.
But these people, they want to collect money from my estate, which they have. Everyone has collected money from my estate except for me.
Me too. I got not a
Except
dime.
I haven't gotten any money. I'm actually penniless. I don't understand how they could take an estate like ours and
Mhm.
leave me penniless and
Mhm.
then, cancel the divorce, just dismiss it, leaving me married to my abuser. There's actually a law crime on the books. I think it's indentured servant.
mm,
So technically, I'm a slave, you guys.
hmm hmm
Thank you, Judge Neil Cerny, for making me a slave. Thank you.
Yeah, you're a big help.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I don't think Orel was a big help either.
Oh, he was treacherous. That man was treacherous. He was. He watched me coming into court telling him, I don't have food. I don't have enough money on my public aid card for food. He laughed. He thought it was funny. Yeah.
I couldn't even get government assistance because all the assets that still belong to me, I wasn't, I couldn't get any assistance. And that's the
Wow.
sad part, you know.
Wow. Wow. I was completely honest. I told them, yes, I own these properties, but look at my bank account. I have no money coming in. My husband took it all.
Hmm.
So I was definitely honest, and they were definitely aware I own property. But my husband's name is on the house, so I can't sell the house. I can't take out a loan. I can do nothing because he doesn't show up to court. So I'm stuck. And then all of my other properties are all in foreclosure. I can't work any of my businesses. You need money to make money. I couldn't renew my general contractor's license. I had to close my business because I couldn't address some work issues. My basement flooded, causing me to close. I could never get the stuff taken care of.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Oh,
So this was all a scheme by the judges and my spouse. This was definitely well planned out. And the judges went along, supported him. They even ignored like death threats from my husband. I submitted this in court to Judge Scarron. He just ignored it. It's like, here are legitimate death threats that he's emailed me. There's a ton of text messages requiring me to beg for money to buy groceries. And Judge Scarron, he just ignored it and continued with the process of trying to force me to sell my home. From the beginning of the divorce, this house was the focus. Madison took all the money. They focused on my house, and they've been trying to steal and take my house from me ever since.
yeah, the
Yeah, I
payoff.
worked very hard. Yeah, I worked very hard for this home, and I'm not giving it up without a fight. So I'm still in the fight.
That's the emotional connection that you have to that house. And the same with me is my home that I was living in is one that I had built on South Padre Island. And my ex-husband knew that the emotional connection I had to that home. So that was his first weapon. And
Yeah,
that is to emotionally abuse you.
Mhm.
It is,
100%.
Jackie. It's sad.
Yep, 100%. A lot of emotional abuse.
Hmm.
From the judges as well, from my husband, the judges, and the attorneys. They worked very well to just, to do people in. And
Right.
this is done all throughout court systems in the US.
I,
Correct.
and I'm glad legal abuse is in the DSM-5.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to add that to my complaint. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Michael, tell me about
My
you.
turn. Well, I'm a entrepreneur above all, at 19 years old, I started my collection agency business in the basement of my parents' home in Rockville, Maryland, and grew that business to where we had 11 people. I'm saying we because my brother joined me 2 years into the business. And he came from the multi-level marketing and timeshare business. And I said, above all, Steve, this is an honest business and it's going to be slow growth and it's going to grow just a little bit every single year and no one's ever going to take it away. Right.
Mhm.
And so now it's 40 years later and my brother owns his own business and I own my business,
Mhm.
two separate businesses, and they are competitors. And that happened in 2003 to 7. So there was 4 years of splitting the business. We actually used a real receiver, uh, and it took a year and a half for them to create two businesses from one.
Mhm.
So there were they created payroll systems. This would be normal, right? This is
Mhm.
how you would do it if you actually wanted to split
Right.
the, goose. And so they did. They split the goose. I ended up with my own business, FCO, and my brother ended up with his business, and he named that business Hunter Warfield. And I thought, why in the world would you call your business Hunter Warfield,
Mm-mm.
Well, I think the idea was is that his business was going to hunt me.
Mm.
like a war. And so,
Mm.
next thing I knew, here I am in 2013, and I'm just very, very successful. I'm making $1.5 million to $2 million a year. And this provides horsepower for the business to grow. What this means is that my personal bank account, my personal asset balance sheet is improving and growing and looking great. And now I've got a company worth millions that's all caught up, and my personal balance sheet is looking great as well. It's each spurs the other along because my company is an S corporation, so it just rolls up to me.
Mhm.
And I just come from a world of paying your taxes and paying your bills and all that stuff. Um, I had no idea that big business is about ripping other people off
Oh,
and stealing, but
yeah.
this is kind of the what I've learned is that here I was in 2013 in Maine on my 50th birthday, and there were 74 people present to celebrate my birthday. But there was a plan in place with my corporation already to
Mm.
steal my corporation to make a fool out of me on my birthday,
Mm.
and that my executives were going to work with my lawyers and my brother to take my business from me and combine it with my brother's business. Anyway, a couple years, I had no idea something occurred there at all. I just thought, I was splitting up with my wife, or well, it wasn't a wife at the time. I was, she is the mother of my two children. I never married her.
Mm.
She's the mother of my first two children, and my first two children are now 22 and 28,
Mm.
or 23 and 27. And anyway, the where was I? Where was I? The so we I yes, I had no idea something was going on my birthday there. Uh, I at that time, I said, this is terrible. I'm going to have to sell, my assets in Maryland and Maine and split up with this mother of my two children, and it's going to cost a lot of money, and this is going to be terrible. Um, and I didn't realize that my lawyers and my executives were saying, "Yeah, we got it."
Mm.
Right? We got him and we'll never let him go, right? And that was the plan, that my lawyers and executives were already deep in. And that was 2013. So that's 10 years ago, 12
Mm.
years ago. So, um, and it's been, ever since then, it's been like whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. My life was progressing.
Mhm.
I met Laura in Florida. I moved to Florida. I met Laura in 2014. And by 2016, we were married in Ormond Beach, Florida, and had a waterfront intercoastal property there. Um, it's just seemed wonderful.
Mhm.
And we had three children.
Mm.
Uh, but meanwhile, this was 2016. We were married there at the property. And meanwhile, this company, Appfolio, had been
Mhm.
gone public. And I didn't know anything about it,
Mm.
but it was something that my executives all knew about and my brother knew about and my lawyers knew about and my CPAs knew about. And it was their plan to just make my business part of that enterprise. and all my employees were going to go work. And it was going to be much deeper than that because they were going to come up with a plan to, like Despicable Me, where we're going to run the universe, right? We're going to run the multi-housing universe. And we're computer people, and we'll know all the secrets, and we'll drive out the competition, and we'll run the world.
Complete takeover.
Yeah, it just seems
Uh,
too preposterous to believe,
mhm.
but it's true.
Right.
I mean, the truth of it is this, that Appfolio was born of some guy named Klaus Schauser. And he had a partner. And this guy is apparently a heavyweight from University of California, Santa Barbara, right? And so you, at that point, you are not just you're a political person, right? You are a banking person where the bankers love you. And this is, so it's very, very chummy. It's very, very political. And all of a sudden, this guy is starting a public company. Now, I had no idea, but I know this, that my clients consist of BlackRock and
Mm,
Vanguard and State Street Bank, because these are the companies that own the multi-housing buildings that we collect for. So we collect for about 1 million units. Uh, Nationwide, we collect about $40 million a year, and our clients, and we split that money with our clients. We get about 30% of it, 35% of it, maybe 40% of it, and our clients get 60%.
mm,
I mean, that's typically the deal. It's a what do you call it? A contingent fee arrangement.
mm,
Um, and there's a great deal of trust. In other words, my company has to be good for every single transaction. We've got to be good for that $50 transaction and make sure nobody's getting ripped off. The
mhm,
consumer cannot get ripped off. This is a good, honorable business, and it doesn't harass anybody, it
mhm,
doesn't abuse anybody, it doesn't break the law at all, it pays its taxes. And meanwhile, Appfolio was born, and it just wasn't born to be that way. They were looking for a sucker, and they wanted to take in my business because my brother was already willing. And that means you're willing to do whatever the mothership says you're
mhm,
going to do, right?
mhm,
And so Appfolio had two classes of stock. And when you have two classes of stock, um, that second group of stock can be used almost like printing your own cash.
mhm,
And I never knew anything about this. But the more that I've looked at this predator corporation, the company that came after me, Appfolio,
mhm,
the more I can see that what they've done is created a structure that is a financial pyramid. And I'm going to share a screen with you here so you can see this. But they've created a financial pyramid, and it's truly remarkable, where the Class B stock is far more uh, valuable
mhm,
than the uh, profits of the company itself.
mhm,
So the company doesn't really exist at all to make money because the real revenue has to be faked. The problem with Appfolio is that they are a multi-housing software company.
mhm,
And that is like Yardi or MRI or RealPage.
mhm,
And the problem with being a software company is it just doesn't pay enough,
mhm,
right? You can't get enough clients and they all want you to do custom programming. And by the time you get into their custom program, what you realize is that hiring the people to do those custom programs is hard. They're hard to come by.
Mm-hmm.
And so meeting the client's needs is very, very difficult and very, very expensive. Uh, and the clients don't want to make you rich. So I believe Appfolio came up with another way to get rich, and that is to create the illusion of a company that is basically a AI company. And this is no AI company at all. All this is a predator company.
Mm-hmm.
And Appfolio decided that it would take all of my infrastructure, my staff, my clients, um, and everything, and just take it for free and work with the attorneys in my divorce to just kick me to the street and tell me that I need help. So they did. But now the problem is that Appfolio is essentially caught. So they have already, I didn't even know Appfolio existed until July 30th of 25. So they have gone so far down this rabbit hole by now that I've caught them. They weren't
Wow.
being careful
Right.
at all. But now they need this, revenue stream. They need to sell these Class B shares of stock because that's likely where a bunch of the money comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Where all the excitement comes from. In other words, they're taking these shares and they're essentially trading them with themselves because between the owners and the institutional investors, they own about $7 billion of the 10 or 9 or $10 billion market cap. In other words, there's the public is hardly participating here. You guys have created a $10 billion illusion of what? You're a software company that serves the multi-housing business.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it starts looking real bad because I've been watching them, and I've compiled this PDF here packet, and what just happened yesterday, there was an investor conference held on November 18th, just this Tuesday, and I participated. And I'm an executive, so I can tell when they're selling the sizzle, not the steak. I can tell when this guy, he's talking like Trevor Milton from Nikola Motors, who they faked the hydrogen 18-wheeler. They rolled it down a hill and told investors worldwide that it was a working hydrogen truck. Yeah. In other words, once the lie gets going, they really go whole hog with it, right? It becomes a lot like Sam Bankman-Fried, where you're now have so many hands in this pot, and they all know it's never going to last. So
Right.
they're just taking as much as they can get. And this is what Appfolio is now. They're not going to get away with this.
Mm-mm.
So I know their stock is going to go down because I know the company is a fraud. I know it's a financial scheme, and I know these numbers don't work out. And I don't care if you went to University of California at Santa Barbara and you're rich and you have $1 billion to hand around like it's a cash app. What
Mm-hmm.
the heck? Yes. Yes, they have taken $1.1 billion out of this company, and he just took another $112 million out on Tuesday. Because if they don't do it, the company will just, right? That's where the money comes from. It comes from trading these stocks. Anyway, so Klaus Schau. So I got good at watching, what they're doing, and I came up with who are the high rollers at Appfolio. Um, and what they've done is since 2015, they've converted 1.2 billion. I believe the number is correct. 1.2 billion worth of Class B stock. Uh, and during the same period, the company only earned 441 million. So the money is all in the stock, and the stock is all owned by the insider. But the company's public. What do you mean public? The owner's printing his own cash. He printed $1 billion. What the heck is going on? Well, I found out from ChatGDP that a lot of tech companies are structured this way. Real, companies that haven't done so well. Roku is structured this way. Pinterest is structured this way. Airbnb is structured this way.
Mm.
They kind of are acting like pump and dumps, aren't they? And, this company is just not different. They stood there on the stage at that investor meeting and they just sounded like liars.
Hmm.
And that's how it works. There's no way out of this, guys. I caught you.
Hmm.
And now I'm laughing. Of course, this is pure joy for me. I'm laughing because I know how executives act
Hmm.
and I know what numbers to look for. And here's what's cool is that I put this PDF together here. MarketBeat did a article about Appfolio just the other day. Um, and they said, wow, look, there's insider trading, $330,000 worth, and another $453,000 worth. But they curiously forgot the 200 million. Pardon me. They forgot the 200 million. They really did.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because the bankers and the politicians are all so busy pocketing this money, knowing that not going to last. This company's not going to last.
Hmm.
Or it'll go to $50, right? Where it's worth $1 billion, not 10. All right.
Yeah.
This company's not worth $10 billion. And I
Michael,
know what they're doing.
Hmm.
Michael, have you looked up the piercing of the corporate veil?
I can look more into that.
You need to look
Here's the
into
fun.
the
Here's some
piercing of the corporate veil.
for these guys. For these guys, is that what you're speaking of?
Well, all of this.
For me, yeah. I mean, they pretended I had no corporate veil. They came after
That's
me like I
that's the
was,
corporate veil
yeah,
is when they hold the shareholder. Basically, you're being held financially hostage to the fraud being created within the corporation, and they're using the corporation's funds to basically create other corporations, and then they're holding you as a shareholder for financially liable
yeah.
for that. And that's the piercing of the corporate veil. And I think that you
Wow.
really need to research that.
Good. Let me show you some of this fun document I've got here. So, I went with ChatGDP and I said, Chat, tell me, here's this market beat article. Let's compare it to the reality. And I put together this packet myself because Chat's not real good at keeping documents in order.
Hmm.
And Maurice, I came up with the high rollers that are trading the most stocks. They are insiders at Appfolio, and Maurice Duca is one of them. They call him Maurice Duca. He is the chairman of the investor group of Santa Barbara,
Hmm.
and this is apparently the company that made it possible for Appfolio to go public or sponsor whatever. They held a role in it. And now he moves millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of stock through this company, investor group of Santa Barbara. So if I wonder why I'm having trouble in my life, maybe it's the investor group of Santa Barbara that has reached out to the judges and the lawyers and the town of Ormond Beach Police Department, what, to buy them new gear so they can attack me in my home,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that,
Mm-hmm.
you know? In other words, these people have 900, right? They want me unalive.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Maryann, you know. Anyway, I went here and I just the SEC website has this, information. Who would ever have a reason to become chummy with this information? But I've got them now, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
So now look at all the trading. This is just August when MarketBeat was talking about his trades. This Maurice Duca, he is not only trading, he's selling his stocks at the very height of the market where the stock's now at 227 bucks. He was selling shares at 303 bucks, 3, 5, 6, 7, 310, right? He's an insider scooping up that money because this is the real value of Appfolio. And so look at these trades. This is just Duca. And, so I've got all his trades from August. It is just absolutely, it's what I expect. It's what I expect. These are elites, and they can take these shares and toss them to someone who they need a job done. In other words, if they need a psychological profile done on me, do you think they can get it done so they can steal my business? Yes, yes. So Reese Duca, a high roller at Appfolio. Do you think he means well to my children?
Mm-mm.
Do you think he wants my children to have a college degree like him?
Mm-mm.
You know, uh, it's not like he's not running an honest business. He's stomping my kids out so he can run a dishonest business. And
Mm-hmm.
he's using the money to entice lawyers and judges and hospitals and police. And then there's Matthew Mazza. He's a lawyer, but he doesn't work there anymore, does he? Because they know I'm coming.
Mm-hmm.
Legally, I'm looking. I'm looking, aren't I? And I'm looking in the right place. I found them. I know exactly what they're doing. Of course I do. I'm an executive. So here they talked about the lawyer Mazza selling a few shares in September. Well, he sold double what they're talking about. They told us about the 1,300 shares. Well, he sold another 1,600 too. You forget. And then we moved to Klaus Schauser, and you see all these little transactions, 100 shares, 700, 748. Oops, and then there's 300,000 because that's a $90 million transaction.
Wow.
And MarketBeat didn't see that little August of 25. And they've done this every year since 2015.
Well, look where it's going. It's being paid to the family trust, and that
Oh
way,
yeah. Oh
contractual.
yeah. And you see how it's being transferred for $0. There's no capital gains.
Mhm. And if you
None.
look at the indirect and the direct relations to these stocks, like this is an indirect ownership, but the ones that you were talking about with that Michael, he was a direct ownership, which means they didn't acquire those shares. They were directly owned from the beginning. Is that not how that is, Michael?
Yes. What happened is Appfolio from the very beginning had 26
Hmm.
million, I believe,
Those were the
million.
direct shares then, right?
I believe there were 26, there's still another million Class B shares ready for him to trade in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Can you scroll back up? I want to
Uh,
see who those attorneys were made payable if those went to a
oh,
trust as well.
exactly. And are you talking about Duca?
Yeah,
Duca is
yeah.
where you'll see the IGSB, and the IGSB is uh, that
Oh, see, that one went to a
investor
pension
group of
trust,
Santa Barbara.
to a
Yes.
pension trust, to a family trust. So this he's distributing his throughout
This could be
different
going to
areas.
my wife. This could be going to
Mhm.
Laura.
But
This
that's
could be
how
going, yeah,
that's yeah, that's how they're
this
doing that. You
and
need to
and
go in and you need to look up all of these LLCs that all these stocks are being transferred to,
yeah,
Michael.
and get this. When I thought I was done with this document, and
Mhm.
here on the very next day, this document's looks different because it's just come online. It's a picture of it. But
Can
this
you
guy,
zoom in to that,
yeah,
please,
yeah,
Michael?
he traded another 500,000 shares. Another Klaus Schauer did another five after he
Wow.
knows I'm looking. They all know I'm looking now,
Mhm.
right?
Mm.
But here he is,
He's the
and this
attorney.
this address this address is Appfolio's uh, uh, campus, their corporate campus,
Mm.
where they have, I don't know how many staff they have there, but look at that
Yeah.
500,000 shares. And you guys didn't think this was a good idea to talk about this at the investor conference?
Ah.
Right.
Wow.
You know,
Mhm.
you've got the investors sitting there saying, the customers are really a little unhappy because you're charging them $2.65 for an ACH debit against their checking account.
Yeah.
You guys are ripping off our customers, right?
Mm.
It's so gross. You
Yeah.
know, these are super yacht and private jet folks who are allowed to lie, to the judge, to the IRS, right? And in return, they get to rip off the world in the US stock exchange, right?
Mm.
And then
Withholding
you
information.
then you just spread that money around to the politicians and judges and lawyers who like to ride those super yachts with you
Mm.
because it's all a lie. So, that's how that looks. Klaus Schauser, I've got no reason to think he's anybody. I don't care who he is, but this is what, I've got to call him like I see him.
Mm.
Anyway, here is this report that this is how I came across these guys, as I noticed the Vickers Insider Profits report available on um, on Schwab, and this does makes an attempt to show you this information in a fun, palatable way. But my guys at Appfolio have learned to completely skirt the callouts. In other words, Klaus Schauser is not on here for those massive transactions. They don't get flagged. Notice their sell
Mm.
rating is all a 6. In other words, Appfolio has gone to great lengths to make sure they don't show up on here,
Mhm.
right? And, you
So
know,
those big cells that had a 0% are not had a $0 amount are
yeah,
not showing up.
yes, and if you check GDP for insider sales at Appfolio, it will not immediately think there's a problem. In other words, ChatGDP looks at the volume of stock and it says the amount traded this year seems acceptable, and it never goes to check on what the amounts traded every year were. In other words, I had to be the one to put two and two together and say this is all a financial pyramid, and then ChatGDP is laughing and saying, you're an executive, so you know these things. Of course I do. I've got them red-handed. I know they've done it. And I know the psychology too. I know how people act when they're liars, right? When they're standing up there lying, lying, lying. It hurts. It makes attorneys run for the hills. So Maz's gone, man. He's gone. And they've gone, Appfolio has gone through lots of CFOs Chief Financial Officer is the job you can't keep, can you? Not when everybody's ripping off everybody else. Nobody wants to work that job, right? Not when Schauser and Maurice Duca and Matthew Mazza have traded stocks in this manner. And what are you doing? Going to the institutional investors and giving them each $100 million to play the game? If you can send a cash app, why not? Right? Why not send a private investigator into my home? That was Samantha King. It happened in 2022. There was a woman in my home. She was probably a lawyer or somehow connected to this system. I served her dinner like 7 times. She was there to tape record me, to gather documents, to get my passwords, and to eliminate me. Because that's what it becomes a game of eliminating the competition. And so they surround you with lawyers, and lawyers, judges, and CPAs, and they all know their job is to get rid of me. It hasn't worked very well, obviously. It has the reverse effect quite often, right? And so now you've got 4 of us here because Maryann, you're just as angry as we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know you are. That's why I'm here, Maryann, because you get it. I know you get it.
I get
So
it. Yeah.
they're funny now. They're funny. They're funny. I see the humor in this. I do.
It's easier to laugh than to cry, honestly, and that's the sad part, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. At some point, you start laughing, you get this morbid sense of humor.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Here's Schauser on here on the Vickers report with this 300,000 shares. And look how it shows up. It doesn't even give a price.
Indirect open market.
Yeah, it doesn't even give a price. But and now I guess those 500,000 shares that Schauser converted on Tuesday, we're already seeing those being traded. But the problem is if the institutional investors and the insiders are the ones holding the money, the 7 million worth of stock, they all want to sell it. No one wants to buy it. You guys are screwed. You're screwed, right? I gotcha. See, right? The game's on you now, right? And the institutional investors are now going to be angry, right, at Schauser and Duca and Mazza, right? How'd you guys get us caught? And they're going to say, well, Carol Bloom and Stephen Sobota and Ronald Cantor and Edmund Gregory did this to us. And we were suckers, but but that's the truth is that Appfolio wanted to go into a big crime, and my executives and my brother were willing, and they, everybody starts keeping their mouths shut
Mm.
as the crimes just get worse and worse, and we can't forget about Phil Niles, because Philip Niles was my good friend, and I was introducing him to the business. And they didn't want him,
Mhm.
of course. And he was out in California, in Glendale, when he was murdered on my wedding day. And I promise you, I know Phil very, very well.
Mm.
And what I believe happened is he knew all about the Appfolio scheme, and they promised to pay him on my wedding day. And I believe they paid him with lead.
Mhm.
So he was
Oh,
shot 8 times and died there of a 9 millimeter attack.
Mm.
that's terrible. Terrible.
Yeah. Just young 30s, young 30s.
Oh.
Um, his sister is a lawyer in Washington, D.C.,
Mm.
named Burgundy Niles. His mother is Cindy Lee Niles of Daytona Beach, Florida. She runs a nail salon school, and her husband Phil loved his father, and I was essentially a father figure to Phil because I treated him like my father treated me. I treated him with respect and honor and truth. You know, so I think Phil was gonna tell me, and
Mhm.
they silenced him.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Wow.
fun. This is fun. It's fun to investigate them. I guarantee these people don't want me looking after their shenanigans, right?
Mm.
And I'm capable of running Appfolio.
Mhm.
I can do it. I can do it honestly. It'll be a smaller company.
Mhm. Mhm.
It'll be a $1 or $2 billion company, not a $10 billion company, because that's all a lie.
Yeah.
So,
Goodness.
um, but yeah, I'm really fortunate. I'm fortunate to have such nice friends here with Maryann and Jackie and Courtney. Huh?
Of course. You're not
Definitely.
alone, Michael. We
No.
support you.
Mhm.
Thank you,
Mhm.
Jackie. It's meant a lot.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'd like to have you all back on for updates if you like. And if you how do each of you want to be reached, or do you want them to come through me?
I'm easy. Michael Sobota at Mac.com. Michael Sobota at Mac.com. That's Michae. That's right on the screen. But yeah, and I essentially talk to people who are victims, and I don't have much time for anybody else.
Hmm. Hmm.
Absolutely. I can be reached on Facebook, Jackie Johnson Sample. Feel free to inbox me, DM me, whatever you call it. I too have become an advocate. When I heard about your story, Michael, and even your story, Courtney, we've talked. It just breaks my heart to see people suffering.
Mhm.
It's one thing to feel, okay, I know I'm not alone, but it still breaks my heart to hear so many stories of what's happening with court
Hmm.
victims.
True. Yeah. I can be reached on Facebook as well, Maryann Courtney Brooks Van. They can send me a friend request, DM me. I too like to share my story and try to help others and let them know that we're not alone and that, we'll help each other and we'll see this through. We'll come out the other side stronger than what we were.
Right. We're here
Truly
to
believe that.
support each other and be advocates and teach people what's going on
Mhm.
in this big world that we could never imagine this has happened to us.
That's right.
So I totally thank you all. Don't jump off. Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. I totally thank you, Michael Sobota, Jackie Sample, and Courtney Vann. Thank you so much for coming out and sharing all of this with us.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you, Maryann. Thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Courtney.
Yes, thank all of you. Thank you, guys.
Mhm.